we go. Box office news for May.
Gabe, can you start over? I screwed up something. Go ahead and
Are we going now?
Yeah, start over. Yeah.
Okay, this is my dinner with Gabe. I am assuming, okay, we are starting our broadcast. This is another fantastic episode of Zav and Gabe's Film Review Show. We have Mark Borchardt today, who will be speaking with Carl Bogner, who is currently unavailable, but will be showing up any minute in a very Bogner-esque fashion. Very, very big honor to have both of you here today.
Thank you, Gabe.
I'm a huge fan of both of these men, and I am very honored that either of them would want to come on our show and that are on our show. We are going to discuss Ari Kaurismäki's Proletariat trilogy.
Aki Kaurismäki.
Maki. Aki Kaurismäki. A little bit. Anyway, well, and so I'm going to start off with some box office news and some film news.
And Gabe, while you do that, you think I could park my car?
Oh, literally?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Please,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark. Okay. So here's your box office news for May 18th. The Avengers stayed at the top spot. Shockaroo for the third week in a row. Third highest weekend ever behind Avatar with $55.6 million, bringing its grand total up to $457. Sixth highest all-time gross. Zav and I cannot figure this out. Opening second was Battleship with a meager, weak, pathetic, sinking 25.5, way under expectations from Universal, having plugged over $200 million into this failure. My goodness, this was just an unexpected destroyer down. Expectations were low for this film from box office and critical analysts, but no one could have predicted this. This was much lower than other Hasbro debuts, even smaller on the Hasbro even the two other films which were the smallest on the Hasbro scale, Transformers with 84.9 and G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra with 54.7. This was just the low point. So we'll see what Hasbro has in store after this. I know that they are coming out with a new Transformers film next year, so hopefully that will bring back some of this box office destruction. The Dictator opened third with 17.4. Not a terrible opening, not an amazing opening. Dark Shadows fell 57% for fourth place with 12.5 in its second week, bringing it up to 50.7. Very unlikely that this $150 million Tim Burton and Johnny Depp comedy will reach $100 million. Another second week of May opening failure for Warner Brothers year after year. What to expect when expecting opened with a pathetic fifth, 10.5. Its male-directed advertising campaign for a pregnancy comedy did not work. Shockaroo. Sixth was The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. This is a sleeper hit of the year. This movie is rising fast with the over 25 crowd. Every week, this movie is gaining new theaters, new patrons, and new moviegoers. And word of mouth is spraying this movie hard. 3.2 million its third week, already at 8.2 in under 1,000 locations. Amazing. Simply amazing. Hunger Games was seventh with 2.9, bringing its 9-week total up to 391.5. Strong stuff for Lionsgate. Think Like a Man was eighth with 2.6, bringing its 5-week total up to 85.8. Pretty strong for the romantic comedy. The Lucky One was ninth with 1.7, bringing its 5-week total up to 56.9. And The Pirates Band of Misfits, 1.5, bringing its 4-week total up to 25.4. Kind of sad for such an entertaining movie in its 10th week. So, The Avengers in its third week earned about as much as the 3 other new releases combined. Like I said, second best third weekend ever behind Avatar, 6th all-time gross. Just about to pass Star Wars in a day or so. Battleship was sunk, even less than other small, middling, pathetic alien invasion movies of late. Cowboys and Aliens with a meager 36.4 and Battle Los Angeles with 35.6. This movie just took the cake in crappiness. Even less than the legendary bomb John Carter, which opened at 30.2. We'll see if this one becomes the new record for the all-time bomb. The Dictator was less than the other Baron Cohen efforts. Borat with 26.5 and Bruno that opened with 30.6. What to expect when expecting was 70% a female audience, which ended up being its problem because it was a male-dominated advertising campaign. And it just didn't pay off. Shadows is down and out. Opening this Friday, May 25th. Moonrise Kingdom, Wes Anderson's newest, latest, and possibly best film yet. Two preteen lovers run away together, causing a quirky search party to ensue. Very typical of an Anderson-esque comedy. Let's hear the cast. Ed Norton, Bruce Willis, Frances McDormand, Tilda Swinton, Bill Murray. How can't you go wrong with this? How can you go wrong with this movie? Just listen to that cast.
Easily.
Oh, man. Well, you are such a party pooper. Wes Anderson has a fun, likable sensibility to himself. I don't always care for his cinema, but it brings people together, and that is sometimes what going to a movie and sitting in the dark with a bunch of strangers is all about. Supposedly, what I've been reading about this film is that it's alive, vibrant, mystical, enchanting, deeply haunting, and very strangely romantic. Chernobyl Diaries is coming out, no critic screening. That speaks for itself. The found footage horror crap fest will probably end up being as such. Men in Black 3, superficial summer fun. Who cares? Go see it if you want to. Don't see it if you don't want to. Not a big deal. This movie's going to rake in cash no matter what anyone says. However, what they did say is that it has a fun time travel plot that's strangely tasteful, and the 60s nostalgia is done right. Josh Brolin as a younger Tommy Lee Jones is supposedly brilliant, possibly up for an Oscar nomination. Speculation is already sane. And as far as I can tell, that's our box office and film movie news for May 25th. Ding, 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 ding.
Thank you, Gabe. And Carl, since you're in on a lot of things happening around town, is there any movie news that you know about? Any screenings coming up that people should know about?
No, school just ended, and that's usually how I set my clock. And I'm trying to think. You know, some of our students are just returning from the Cannes Film Festival, where they were showing their films in the short film corner.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Also, Dick Blau and had a film there, as did Kelly Bronikowski and Julie Wolterstorff. And,
At Cannes.
Yeah, and John Phillips and Sam, I want to say Krakow, but I think that's a city in Poland. But I'm blanking on his last name. Yeah, it's the short film corner. It's sort of in the exhibitionist, what do you call that area? In the marketplace where people can come and sample short films from.
From all over the world.
From all around.
So is this a new thing?
This is the second year we've had students and faculty represented there.
Wow. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, and two of our students, grad student Brian McGuire and undergrad Greg Bishop, were also interns at the American Pavilion this year.
And what is that?
That's it's about America, Zav. It's where people can come and learn about the American film industry, and they were performing various duties there. It was mostly like a chance for both of them to get to experience the festival, meet filmmakers, and check out the scene.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's probably all the movie news I have. I know regionally some interesting experimental stuff is coming up. The Chicago Underground Film Festival is starting this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I know there's some of our which is always a really great program. I think it's at the Gene Siskel Film Center in Chicago, and some of Ross Nugent, who's on the staff in the Department of Screening of Film, and some other students. So.
All right, cool. I'm glad we asked you. Mark, do you know any movie things? Is there anything you wanted to add to that you know about?
No.
Okay.
Can I ask, when is that Wes Anderson movie opening? I know
Today.
In Milwaukee? I'm sorry, I don't mean
believe it is wide release, yes.
Okay, wow.
I know that one snuck up on me. I actually didn't know about it at all until last week, and then I was like, Moonrise Kingdom. That's an interesting title, and I was just like, okay. And everything pre-buzz that I've heard about it so far is that it's very un-Tenenbaumsy. It's more of a realist film. He's going less for his everything, sort of like. He's going for a more novelistic approach with this film, more dialogue, less quirkiness, less silliness, more genuine humor, more genuine everyday, realistic looks at life, but with still his Andersonian touch of melodrama and color and vibrancy and cinema.
And he shot it on 16 millimeter. Just saying.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that are being released, Chronicle was released on DVD last week or something like that. Chronicle?
Last week, Tuesday.
Chronicle. And everyone except Carl saw it. but we didn't tell you about it.
Is this the kids go into that cave and get special
Yes,
powers?
yes.
Oh, is it good?
Well, let's
see
start.
because before we get into Aki Kaurismäki, we might as well just
Let's do a quick 5-minute
quickly
rundown of
go
this
over
of this of this film chronicle. Zav, you first.
Well, actually, I'd like you guys to go first.
Okay. Mark?
Well, I don't see too many contemporary films, so to me, it's always just this kind of a treat to be exposed to that. And I think there's three main protagonists. They're still in high school, right? So they got to be 18. So they're drawn pretty intelligently. They're not like what you would lewd high school schmucks or anything like that. They're one is into philosophy, Schopenhauer and Plato and all that. Another is I think he's like high school president or something like that.
He's kind of a young Obama or something.
Yeah, and he's not.
What?
He's biracial?
No, he's a black dude.
He's
There's a black guy who's student council president.
Yeah.
And very likable.
Very,
and
very,
charming.
very charismatic, a people person, all of that stuff. So, and then another one, his dad's a firefighter. He's being abused by his father. His father's a real tough drinker, and so on and so forth. But all three characters, like I say, they're intelligently drawn. They have dignity and so forth. They're not like blaspheming their age or anything like that. And so anyway, one of the cool things is it takes place in Seattle, and you get a real feel for the city at times. And it's kind of neat. I've never been. Well, I've been there. But if you hadn't been there and you're coming downtown and you see the magnificence of the Space Needle at night, that in itself is a nice shot. And as Gabe was saying, the special effects really are a big part of the film, and they're really fantastic and believable to a point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Gabe was talking about physically jumping up and down while watching it. My son and I had watched. I can't say we did remain in our seats. Now no, that's not to downplay the effect of the film or anything like that, okay? So they have. Are we giving away what the film is, Gabe?
Well, I would say a decent synopsis, and what's been already revealed on the trailer is that they encounter some sort of spatial life force similar to like an 80s horror film. They're granted supernatural powers, and they become telekinetic with the ability to fly, float, move matter, and sort of be in touch with the force or with the living energy of life.
Yeah, because they can even read each other.
There's minds.
Something's going on with someone else.
There's definitely an emotional connection between the three of them, and they begin to have fun and sort of like play and do what young guys do. And there's really this great, amazing sense of kinship, friendship, and honesty that I felt from the film. There was this moment where one of them is laying there and said, "You know what? Today was the best day of my life." And I started sobbing. I started crying because I felt so much joy for these characters when they're just they're playing like with Pringles, they're playing football, they're scaring people at the grocery store. I mean, I was just amazed at the sincerity behind all these special effects, because the special effects looked analog, they looked real, and the way it was shot, I thought was unnoticeably unhandheld. What was noticeably unhandheld. They didn't try to overdo the Blair Witch factor. They didn't try to overdo the found footage aspect of it. They still wanted to tell a great story with good acting and good characters. I thought intelligence came first on this film, first and foremost, and I thought that the final third of it was really shocking, genuinely shocking.
Well, no. You know what? First off, too, another thing to the credit of the film, having these telekinetic powers, they're never really like any sexual misconduct, not really like abuse, like in a. I mean, it could have went another way.
Right,
it really could have really got nasty.
Yeah.
I mean, there
teenager
are
movie.
Yeah. And so they were really reserved. I mean, decent about it.
Yeah,
Decent.
Yeah, that's really true.
And now Gabe was talking about being disturbed by the last third of the film. As a template, immediately you think Carrie, with the rage against a parent, and that's the whole thing with the telekinetic experience against the mother. In this film, it's against the father, and it broadens past the father in Chronicle, and he affects negatively many other people around him, and that again is deeply reminiscent of Carrie.
And Akira. I found that the special effects and the entire structure of the last third was visually a complete homage to Akira. When I can't remember the character's name, goes completely off the deep end in the last third. Even the way that the smoke starts to swirl and glass shattering, I thought it was a huge homage to that film. But Zav, what's your meta take on this movie?
Well, I one thing I found kind of annoying about the film was the handheld camera thing, that they trapped themselves in this concept that everything has to be on a handheld camera, and yet there was no real reason for it. Other than, I don't know. It was just that they set themselves up with that problem. And then they had to get this girl who uses a camera to kind of get other shots. And it's kind of ridiculous anyway. Like you had to suspend your disbelief on how much camera recording someone's going to do, because they're recording every single thing. And they didn't explain. There was a lot of unfinished, unwrapped up things about the film. What was this thing? There was no exploration into the behind the reason for the actual mysterious thing in the cave that never gets resolved, it never gets explained. The government never gets involved in it. Which is kind of okay, because what you're really doing is it's more about friendship and these friends.
Drama. There's more genuine drama and less Hollywood.
It's more in service of that part of the drama, and that's understandable. The thing I didn't like was the characterization of this character, because I felt like he was like me when I was in high school, and basically what they're saying is if you're someone who's really obsessed with videoing everything, then you've got a problem with reality, and that you're detached and you're not able to connect with people, and that's why you're hiding behind this video camera all the time. And I felt like when they asked him, why are you videotaping everything, his answer, he wouldn't have an answer, because I think the writers didn't have an answer. Even though they're filmmakers, they're making a film. They're also people who are always behind cameras. But I would have, the answer would have been, I want to capture these times. I want to put something down on video. There was no explanation of why this person's videotaping everything all the time, other than that he's got a problem with people and he has to hide behind the camera all the time. So I just felt sort of like, in a way, what they were, the cliche of the character was sort of creating this, like, well, if you're an outsider and you don't really meld with society properly, well, then you probably are someone who's going to want to turn around and become a megalomaniac and destroy the world.
A mass murderer, megalomaniac.
And wants to, deep down, you just want to control the world, and, So that was kind of annoying about it for me. But
I'd have to agree, but, and I thought that the politics behind the film in that sense, in terms of teenage politics, were very sort of, in that regard, was very trite. But I thought that the action of the film and the fact that you could make this, and what I thought about after it was done, I guess let's close this review up, was that this film could actually translate to a high school theater production in some ways. That if you took the acting and the story and the moments in this film and translated it to a minimalist, high school theater, like let's say a town of 5,000 people, it would still work. Yeah,
that's an interesting way to think about it.
It's still a dramatic PowerPoint of a powerhouse of a film.
Which is interesting, because Carrie's on Broadway now again for the second time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You bring
That's
that up,
interesting.
yeah.
I was just videotaping all that just to.
Oh, neato. So let's move on to the
I thought Carrie closed it for the second time already.
Oh, really?
Did?
Carrie, I thought it already closed.
It's
already
already over
closed.
now, but it was recent, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
We're all going to laugh at you.
By the way, we have to share mics, so sorry guys.
So yeah.
Anything to say?
Just for
goodness. So let's move on to Aki Kaurismäki.
Yeah, and well, the Proletariat trilogy, which interestingly enough, I watched an interview where he said, I wouldn't call it a proletariat trilogy, it's a loser trilogy, because it's about people who are below the proletariat. They're the losers among the proletariat.
I completely agree with that. In fact, I think
it's interesting that it's called that.
So Criterion packaging?
Yeah, maybe Criterion just was like not.
Yeah, Eclipse, yeah.
I think they probably just decided for him in some ways.
Well, you guys can do that.
We can
don't forget to do that. Don't forget to do that.
So the films were in order for the trilogy: Shadows in Paradise, which was made in 1986, which won the Finnish equivalent of Best Picture. This was a huge movie for him, which put him on the map both in his own country and abroad. Not as much as Leningrad Cowboys Go America, which came out in 89, but definitely put him on the map. Second was Ariel, the film noir, which came out in 1988, which was a more pronounced and a little more mainstream looking of a film, and a little more higher production values. And Match Factory Girl, which was made in 1990, which won a lot of critical praise and really really set in motion that here was a serious artist working with a consistent theme again and again and again.
Right.
So
before we go into that, I have a feeling, Carl, you know more about Aki Kaurismäki than all the rest of us. And maybe you could just kind of
That's not
introduce
correct.
him. Oh. Well, can you give us
I may have had a longer viewing life with him than you all.
Yeah,
but
I think
don't
you
know
did,
that
because
much
I think
about him.
none of us had really watched his work besides Leningrad Cowboys, maybe.
The Man Without a Past I've seen in Leningrad Cowboys, and I've read his I've read his entry in the Biographical Dictionary. Film.
And I know, Mark, you hadn't seen any of his work before, and I had just seen Leningrad Cowboys peripherally.
I mean, I guess I'm just a fan without knowing a lot. I had not that traveling gives me credibility, but I remember I'd read about Ariel, which was sort of his first film to circulate internationally. It was the Jim Hoberman, this critic I like in the Village Voice, had listed it as the best film of the year it came out. And this says something about movie going in Milwaukee. I drove to Chicago to see it at the Music Box, which was the closest it came to the city. But then his subsequent films, thanks to Matt Frost, who was the programmer at the UWM Union Theater at the time, all played here, which is where I first saw The Match Factory Girl. And that's where Leningrad Cowboys, Go America played, and Matt would also program films by his brother Mika. He's been around for a while. You mentioned Man Without a Past. His most recent film, Le Havre, was a success at Cannes a year ago. Played at the Union Theater earlier this year. But I actually, I know, I was just watching Shadows in Paradise again this afternoon, and I know as much about Kaurismäki as I do about Finland.
Which is what's great about it, is that you discover Finland as you're discovering this director.
Or you discover an idea of Finland, which just seems austere and bleak. Prone to a certain type of facial hair. I meant to shave.
And hairdo, lots of greased back hair.
Oh my God.
And sort of like, seems like it feels, like the last shot of, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Somewhere in Paradise, like they're going on this cruise on a Soviet cruise line. And, they're, it just was reminding me that Finland is Eastern Europe, and it conforms maybe to that idea of, bleakness and austerity. I'm interested in this idea about Proletariat Trilogy and that being an American name, just because as watching it, there's a different attitude about labor that isn't American, or, work is central to this, and work is brutal to this. I'm really free association from your question. But I guess, I don't know, Finland is elsewhere, I guess I mean to say.
Well, definitely work is at the center of these films. That's partly why they bring them together. But actually, when you watch his other films, it seems as though that theme does kind of, what I've seen, I haven't really seen that much, but I did see Man Without a Past, and I watched a few other things, and it seems like those themes just run through his work. And also I watched him be interviewed, and he's definitely a person of, he really has a problem with the bourgeoisie. He even says he could never make a film about the bourgeoisie because it just wouldn't sit right with him. So he's very strongly, pro-labor, pro-worker person, but not in the dogmatic sense. It seems like he's someone who is looking at the humanity behind all that, not like we need to start parties and labor unions all over the world or something.
No, work isn't going to help you in any way. It's just a fact of life. But it's not going to liberate you or release you, whether you're whether you own the shop or not. It's work. Something to escape from.
Mark, you saw these films, and I'm curious to see how you feel about it.
Well, the first one is the Proletariat Trilogy, Shadows in Paradise. It begins with this absolutely beautiful montage of the workaday life of the garbage men and so forth. And I thought, man, this is absolutely beautiful. It's the plot's going to start and erase all of that. And sure enough, because you know what? You have that very that poetic, as they always say, lyrical sense of the dumpsters, the cars, shot very well, very lucidly, and it's all with natural light. And as soon as you get into the narrative, you start to notice artificial light and so forth. So in a sense, it draws you out from that. Also, immediately I thought about Paul Schrader's Blue Collar with the opening montage of the Detroit factory line, And then, interestingly enough, in Shadows in Paradise, one of the older workers, one of the garbage men, has an idea to plot out of that particular company and start his own company. Just like in Blue Collar, they kind of want to plot out of that particular lifestyle, but in what they do is they plan to rob the Union safe. So I just found out, I just thought that there was that lying element between those two films potentially. I was again in speaking with Gabe, we saw all three, and when you see all three, you have begin to get trapped in its sensibility. The first film you see, and then the second and third, you begin to notice that there's a certain tightness, a potential suffocation a little bit, but these are very beautiful films, and these positions these people find themselves in, I wrote down as a finite absurdity within an infinite space. The landscape is beautiful. It's not just a place where things take place, but it's like it is a place. It is an environment. It is so strong, and jumping just scattershot. Even the montages of the machines working is so glorious and so beautiful. I mean, you don't want to keep saying lyrical and poetic, because that's just becomes platitudinous to the max, man. But it has those elements, and then on the other hand, you can only take so much of this constipated stoicism, that these people portray. I'm sorry. I thought you guys were gonna damn me for saying that. I
couldn't agree more. And here's
I wanted to just add to that in addition to
I feel better.
To the beautiful colors and the beautiful landscapes and so on, I love the coffee. Like, it just kept making me want to make a coffee and have like a cigarette, even though I don't smoke cigarettes. But it definitely, like, just a cup of coffee is so beautiful. And it reminds me of when I'm traveling and I'm in an airport, and suddenly those little quotidian things of life become so much more special, because you're in the middle of nowhere and you have no other reference point, but here's this one comforting thing, is a cup of coffee. And I felt like that was also part of his films, that in this like brutal environment, you have this beautiful color to look at least.
In orange soda.
Or just someone's hairdo is just everything gets kind of augmented when the world is a cold place in some ways. Carl, do you have a response to Mark?
I think because I want to hear from Gabe. Because I heard him nodding to.
One thing I would like to say about this. Now, these are beautiful, beautiful, brilliant films. This is a beautiful, brilliant filmmaker, but there is a formula to it. I'm sorry to shatter this, but there is a formula I noticed. Life is a strange anticlimactic joke. The protagonist is accepting of his bitter fate. It's like a proto-Jarmuschian view of melancholy, strange, everyday life in extraordinary circumstances. Accidental, small-scale intrigue, sort of like a very, very strange, like Wes Anderson version of who's the guy of like an early Joseph Conrad novel or something like that. Just these very strange, very like augmented and very pronounced, striking visuals, usually involving props and the way that machinery has sort of overtaken our life, or the way that our own sense of progress has ended up destroying our sense of self and society's sense of worth. And I just feel like there's this forced absurdity, this over-earnest pessimism that feels just kind of contrived. It's a cop-out for genuine tension or engaging, suspenseful dialogue. And I got to say that, especially in Match Factory Girl, there's a one-dimensional, continual barrage of badness against Joan of Arc. It's just endless. It's just not believable. I just was not convinced that this. I get it. It's a story. It's a play. It's a film. But I just think Ms. 45 is such a better version of this story of a woman who decides to take revenge in her own hand. And Abel Ferrara's film, I thought, was a lot more poignant. It's had a lot more to say about the city in which she lives in, and has a lot more to say about this male-dominated chauvinism that she's and just this like sort of crippling world force that she cannot get her finger around. So she just kind of decides to say, well, to hell with it. These are brilliant anarchist films, I will say that. But because of this structure, of this formula, of sitting down and thinking about it, maybe with a cup of coffee, a little too much, I feel like sometimes these characters aren't fully alive. They're not just living and talking and breathing. I can always tell that I'm watching characters. It's my only complaint. But these are great films, totally worth watching for any major cinema goer.
Well, it's interesting because he's known to downplay acting and ask his actors to just, as much as possible, not act. But there was, this was a different, which one was it, where I did see one of the actors reading their lines off the menu. But I guess he does that. He actually won't tell the actors the lines until they come on the set. And so they don't even have a chance to memorize their lines. But Carl, I'd love to hear your response to some.
Well, one, it shows that you know more about Aki Kaurismäki than I do. So I don't know why you set me up with that question earlier. I feel trapped in a Kaurismäkian universe where
there are machines turning around us.
There are, and where bluntness is coupled with kindness. I don't know. This is such an articulate group. I think I agree with the description of these films. I just may have had a different response. I agree that as watching these three films together, there is a formula, and I hadn't thought about Kaurismäki for a while until this trilogy came out, and I watched them last December, and I agree that there is, this idea of this kind of blunt world and this possibility of escape that the first two characters are able to fulfill in some way. But yet, I guess I find the idea of a formula, the idea of the acting style, all conforms to the overall sense of limitation that's available to these people within this world. And also within, I love what you said, Zav, about the hairstyle or these small details, but also within the kind of artifice of the making, not just the sort of heightened lighting, which I couldn't find a good adjective for. Mark was making me understand it a little bit better. It's almost theatrical in some of the interiors, and the palette of these movies is beautiful.
Actually, I mean, one thing about Kaurismäki that needs to be given credit to is his cinematography.
Oh my God.
As a cinematographer, because when someone is doing all your cinematography for you and everyone loves the cinematography, it's kind of like you have to wonder if the cinematographer is really making the movies.
He shoots and edits most of his own work.
But he has a cinematographer, I forget the name, who's done all the cinematography.
I think there was an umlaut.
There's probably an umlaut in there.
But so I guess as opposed to a formula, I would find it more of a compelling and convincing worldview, one that's still foreign. I mean, Abel Ferrara, I love Ms. 45, but that her vengeance is still engaging. I mean, it's kind of a fantasy of vengeance. It's very much informed by movies. Jarmusch, I find, in comparison to Kaurismäki, a little darling. I think I love Jarmusch very much, but just on the Kaurismäkian scale, I think he gives the audience more outs in terms of the prolonged nature of the pleasures. The pleasures in Kaurismäki film I find a little more fleeting, or maybe more in details. But also, what's helping me think about his films is from what's being said about how the possibilities that these characters have within this universe, which are limited. They do seem to flex their selves to the greatest extent they can, frequently shut down, doesn't persist them in that. I think that's what was so satisfying is the Match Factory Girls, the culmination of this trilogy, given that the violence that she enacts seems to be, I responded to it I think more this time than when I saw the movie in isolation, because it seems like, the explosion that culminates from all three films, and not just from the one alone.
Well, I thought that was disappointing. To me, the ending was disappointing in a sense, because then it brought it into the realm of fantasy and took it out of the realm of what really most likely happens in these situations, which is it just continues to be messed up for the person.
I mean, the world doesn't change, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, her, you know, it again, you know, her fate, you know, is
Right.
typical with a Kaurismäki film. I guess I just liked, and it may have been some of the resistance that maybe I had to the formula that I found it gratifying that there was this kind of, on a Kaurismäki scale, an explosion, you know, in the last film.
Yeah.
I do have to say that there is a tenderness and a hope in these movies that I don't know that I've ever seen in cinema before, which is why it's hard for me to criticize them on the one side where I feel like the films are very similar, especially Ariel and Shadows in Paradise, where you kind of have where you have this film noir setup. A stupid protagonist, unnaturally unlucky protagonist who thinks he's kind of getting it or he's got it made, multi-sided, you know, smoking femme fatale in both films. But this is done in the Finnish style where everything's filthy and dirty and everyone has this real bleak sense of humor about how shitty everything is. But it's not like, oh, it's just so shitty, so we should just give up. Everyone keeps trucking on. They understand that the spirit of all things is a noble and worthwhile endeavor.
But they're never romanticized.
Exactly. It never feeds into the Hollywood system. One thing I realized in the middle of Ariel was that his style of sort of this bleak comical worldview makes Woody Allen's style just look incredibly contrived in comparison. And I love Woody Allen's mid-'80s work. I love his resurgence, like Another Woman and Crimes and Misdemeanors. But this stuff just, in terms of emotional realism and truth, I was just like, oh man, there's no American filmmaker of that era that I think even compares. Jarmusch is kind of a joke in comparison. I not a joke.
And I like. I didn't mean to like dismiss Jarmusch. I just like comparing the two.
Yeah.
I like Jarmusch very much.
I think they're almost identical in style in a lot of ways. It's pretty apparent that Jarmusch's style was mostly accommodated from a lot of Finnish or Scandinavian film style. And from Bergman and from him, I would say are like an equal 50-50. And in fact, Jarmusch makes a cameo in Leningrad Cowboys Go America as a car salesman.
Right.
But
Aki Kaurismäki is referenced in the taxi film Around the World. What is it?
Right.
Oh, A Night on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just find that Jarmusch and Wes Anderson are just so much lesser talents than this guy in really taking it all in despite their flaws. Yeah.
Well, Kaurismäki states that he doesn't consider himself to be a world-class filmmaker. He considers himself to be on a different tier, a slightly less tier. That's how he talks about himself. I mean, some of that might be just self-effacing, maybe self-indulgence in a way.
Self-indulgence, right there, but I love it.
But at least he states it that way. But I do see one of the different. So what I was going to say is, it's not so much about talent as where he is mentally with his work and what his work is saying. And I feel like his work is much more from the perspective of someone who is genuinely depressed and sees the darkness of life, but also is trying to do the right thing with that. That there's that Scandinavian depression in his work.
Oh yeah, definitely. Dysthymia for sure.
He's known to actually do a lot of his directing drunk. Interchangeably drunk and not drunk.
This just feels like American Euro bashing. Yeah, I don't know.
Mark, do you have anything to add to
Everyone here is drunk, by the way.
Everyone, we're wasted.
Well, no, I want to react first to the Jim Jarmusch thing. I think that there's a obviously an imagination running wild with Jarmusch's films, and I find, like I said at the beginning, to Kaurismäki films to be they begin to become suffocating, and so I would there's only so much you can particularly take in one onslaught, in a sense. I found them to be adult fairy tales, but before anyone gets excited about that, they right, because they lack an intellectual mystery, which is almost necessary in sustained film enjoyment of a particular.
What do you mean by that, though?
Well, like there's a, you know, you talk about Bergman, you have Antonioni and that, where there is that deep sensuality of cinema, that deep sensuality of life that's just latently exists, you know. I think I'm just, you know, it runs rampant throughout those films. And here, everything, actually, you know what it is? Robert Bresson, I believe it's a transcendental moment.
Yes.
Now, this is what I wrote. In this, like with Ariel, when the parking meter woman chucks off her hat, you know, and goes with the guy. Well, what I wrote on that was, it was an impulsive decision made without the realistic and necessary weight of forethought, and that I found to be a kind of a mechanic throughout his films. And Robert Bresson capitalized on that with like Pickpocket at the end and so forth, with that transcendental moment where it's this magical happening, obviously, that transforms one's life. But even with suspension of belief really can't even remain intact at that point, because it's just not that believable. There just isn't a preface. There's no prefatory substance, you know, that precedes that moment. It just, and that I kind of found a little unnerving with Kaurismäki's films. There's a point where you cannot buy into what is the value of this fairy tale if you cannot buy into it at some point. I'm just talking about the machinations of narrative, you know what I'm saying, to get people together. Well, it just doesn't really happen that way, you know, because you cannot have two tones of cinema, and you know, you have Jules and Jim, where I think it completely shifts gear midway through from like comedy to tragedy. It's kind of jarring, and you can't have these shifts through, permeate throughout the film and stay on legitimately for the ride. You know, you just can't change your life instantly like that. You know, it just doesn't happen that way, and then expect us to shift back into another gear, and we have a more realistic tone, you know. Anyway, that's what I came out of that.
Bresson is a filmmaker I thought about a lot in watching these films. Not in that any idea of transcendence, but maybe more like the editing style, the elliptical nature, and what you said earlier about performance. Zav is very much in keeping with actors in Bresson's films who
and minimal dialogue.
Minimal dialogue.
Yeah.
But in that shot on the beach, when after they leave town, and I'm thinking of Shadows in Paradise, after she's stolen the money from the supermarket, and they're sitting on the beach listening to music, and he kisses her and pushes her back on the sand, and there's that shot of her hand with the cigarette, feels so Bressonian to me, like the, you know, and showing like, it's both, you know, it looks corpse-like, it's somewhere else. I mean, it's definitely not romantic, but it's something else. I mean, I like this idea of fairy tale, because I feel like there's something about, it's fairy tale without the magic, it's without the transcendence. I don't think transcendence is a possibility for any of these people.
But that's where it did have a little bit of a problem with his films, was that he would tack on these goes. That would, in a sense, I see that as transcendence, where she just, you know, suddenly she goes from being this wallflower who nobody loves and to just like just suddenly is like revenge time, and she starts killing everyone, or they go on this boat. Ariel, you know, that kind of thing, where now they're going to, of course, we don't know, it might totally fail.
The only thing one sees in Florida are Donald ducks and fins. Is that what she said?
Fins,
you know, like what options? Where can they go?
Yeah. There is no happy ending, even though that ship sailing off. What I think is so Bressonian about that is, like at the end of Balthazar, the donkey's dead, but it's a beautiful death. It's the most absolutely beautiful death ever put on film, and it's horrible. It's this horrible thing, but it's just the way life goes. At the end of Ariel, things aren't going to work out. Things are not going to work out. They're probably going to get crushed in the cargo bay, all three of them. And there's lightning. There is a storm brewing right before they get on the ship. They said if there are rough seas or if there's a storm brewing, my conclusion at the end of that film was that they all died. At the end of Shadows in Paradise, that's clearly not going to work out. They clearly, there's no money, there's no resources, there's no reality there. They're living in some sort of a fractured fairy tale mentality fantasy. But I think Kaurismäki's wonder with this sort of ugly poetry, this sort of fatalistic depression, that has this sort of transcendent beauty behind it, even though he never prettifies it. He has pretty things within it, but he never prettifies anything, which is why I think there's a consistency to the beauty of his films. At the end of Shadows in Paradise, I think it's actually a really sad ending when that ship is going up, because it just stays on and it makes you draw your own conclusion. Where you, and that song, and the fact that he is such a he uses music like no other filmmaker I've ever seen before. He has this real sort of like detached way of putting music in there. The only other filmmaker that comes to mind is another Scandinavian filmmaker, Von Trier, in terms of just absolute, like, just, why is this affecting my stomach? Like, why is this physically changing the way I'm viewing this film? I guess that's all I got to say about that.
Of these three, I hadn't seen, when this trilogy came out, I hadn't seen Shadows in Paradise before. Shadows in Paradise, Shadows on Paradise.
Shadows
I can't remember. In. And I have to say, it's currently my favorite movie. And one thing that the joy I experience in this film is when, he says those words, small potatoes, at the end. Because so much about this movie, like, I think the English in this movie is like part of the sort of, not sinister, but it just sort of suggests this sort of global capital world that these, like, why are these people learning English? And of course, the language that they're learning is like this absurd British-based talk about how to check into a hotel. Like, nothing's really practical. And the way this guy, starts to learn how to use a language, and a lot of it is like, now he's like a more macho guy at the end, and it seems to come from fantasy. Like, I mean, rock and roll figures throughout his movies as something people hold on to, and also I think genre does. I liked how Gabe was talking about Ariel's a film noir. I mean, I think these characters are acting out of, like, the available roles they have all come from somewhere else. Whether it be English language or what's the movie they go see, Sergio Leone.
Oh yeah, Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Go see The Good Man and the Ugly.
So it's like another role they take on, not necessarily convincing. It can be satisfying to me as a moviegoer, but I found something really beautiful about him repurposing or claiming small potatoes, given that that's what they all have to live with. Right.
That's very true.
And repurposing it as slang. I don't know. I just find it. I'm really learning a lot about these films through this conversation, because there's still. I haven't spent a lot of time in them. I'm still sort of meeting them.
I feel like I am too, in a way.
Did you guys know that he and his older brother account for 1/5 of all the Finnish films? He and Kaurismäki's older brother, who was his mentor, are 1/5 of all the product that's ever been shipped out of Finland. That's, I think, ever been made within Finland, even. That's considered commercial, that was ever released on a large scale. They are the Finnish film scene, pretty much.
Yeah.
And his older brother really isn't that well known.
Right. And that shows the power of, the United States versus a place like Finland. That, in America, he would just be a teeny tiny part of our cinema that comes from our country.
He'd probably be a plumber.
But it's hard. It's hard to have a cinema in a country. For a country to have a cinema at all is a major deal. And that's why we only have cinema coming from the biggest countries in the world, the most powerful economies in the world, like Japan and United States and Germany.
And China.
And now China. Yeah.
But also the films that translate or are imported are spectacles, and like his work is decidedly anti-spectacle.
Very Fassbinder, anti-cinema in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I'm surprised you guys haven't brought up Fassbinder, because I see a lot of Fassbinder in these films.
I think his work is a little too composed, and it makes a little too much sense, and it doesn't make me want to throw something enough, to be honest, to be compared to Fassbinder enough.
Fassbinder in colors, facial hair and clothes, Bresson in editing.
Okay.
Wow.
No, I think the palette, I would agree.
Yeah, and also, I mean, some of the Fox and His Friends is kind of my favorite Fassbinder film, and I feel like these films reminded me so much of Fox and His Friends.
The same dourness. I mean, the same. The world is going to shut you down.
Yeah.
That's true.
But in Fox and His Friends, there is no happy ending. It's just really bleak at the end.
And we were actually talking about maybe next time watching the Fassbinder trilogy, maybe in about a month or so. Veronica Voss, Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, and there's a third one that I know I've seen. I can't remember.
Maria or something. Maria Brown. Yeah, I think. Marriage of Maria
the
Brown.
Marriage of Maria Brown, yeah. Which I don't know that my heart can handle those movies again, but I think that'd be a great show for maybe in a month or so.
And the music's good. The songs are good.
That's very true.
Yeah.
X, what time are we at?
Oh, well, we have 5 more minutes to wrap this thing up.
Well,
to wrap up Aki Kaurismäki.
Possible.
Have you guys ever seen? Have you guys seen Leningrad Cowboys Go America?
I have not.
Okay, what's your take on that movie, Carl?
It's really enjoyable. I find it I don't like it as much as these because it's the joke. It seems a little too adorable. It seems more like this is a Kaurismäki Jarmusch film, I guess I would say.
I completely agree with that.
And that was the reason why I was dismissive of Aki Kaurismäki, was that I really was not into Leningrad Cowboys, what I saw of it. So I just dismissed him as a filmmaker in some ways because I thought all his filmmaking is sort of jokey and prop driven and stuff like that. Yeah, and I just thought and so I was really amazed when I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this trilogy, and then that led me to watching Man Without a Past, which is really beautiful.
The Cowboys were huge. I mean, like Total Baliaka Show, the concert film he also made of the Cowboys. They were, I understand, just a huge phenomenon in the homeland.
Well, they started off as a as a side project for a band who Aki was considering making music videos for, and then as a sort of a jokey Spinal Tap-esque type of side project, two members from 2 huge groups in that country decided to make a band together called Leningrad Cowboys, and let's put out a single. So they put out a single. They put out a 12-inch or whatever you call it, and then they put out another one, and then people were like, "This is great music. This is great." Like I guess what you would compare nowadays to like Gogol Bordello, like sort of gypsy punk, gypsy post punk, maybe a little bit more accurate, polka gypsy punk, and. He just had this idea, while over drinks, like most Kaurismäki films, just sort of like, we must do it, and then just sort of deciding that they're going to do it, and they just go into production. There's something really to be said about that, because this guy didn't just sit there talking about movies over drinks. He made it while drinking. He still did it. So Leningrad Cowboys came out of this idea, and then they just sort of made the movie as they had a screenplay, but a lot of it was improvised. They had these props. They had a limited budget, but they had this 8-person band, and they just sort of, the movie progressed as you see it. Literally, the road comedy throughout the film is sort of how the production went. It just was like, let's just see where we can go and what happens. And I think it's a really, despite the jokiness and the silliness and the sort of like Jarmuschianness of it, I think it's a really, there's these moments, there are these montages in it that it's a really telling story of sort of the Flint, Michigans of America. I think there's a real earnest beauty to the decay of America in that film that I've seen scarcely elsewhere. And when I have seen it, it was really like, there was music over it. It's done. It's stylized. It's Michael Mooreized. It's just, and I thought that this movie was a real naked approach to that. It was a treat to see this movie again, despite some of its flaws. I just think it's a touching film that has a lot of camaraderie behind it, and maybe that's something about about Scandinavian cinema that I can never quite get my finger around. Maybe this sort of latent sense of we need to work and we need to do it together. I'm not really sure what it is because I don't necessarily, I don't know, I just maybe don't have that in my blood or something.
No, I didn't mean to come down too hard on the film, nor do I mean to offer Jarmusch as a scale of things that I think are bad, because I like him very much. But I would agree with what Gabe said. I might find the film ultimately kind of indulgent, but it has incredible charm and very charming moments. And also, as a European's take on America, it's really great. It's like, it reminds me of William Eggleston's Photographs, or, it's definitely not it's beautiful, but it's about the outsiders in America who the Cowboys interact with. I would agree.
Well, we just got it in here, and I'm going to watch it. Like I say, I watched it on VHS years ago while I was working, and I didn't pay strong attention to it. But go ahead, Mark.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add, completely abstract, as back to this trilogy we discussed. I think it's just, what struck me, it's good films for film students to see, because gives them a sense of possibility in their own environment, what's around with them. I think that there's there can be a sense of like angst or that because of so much narrative that's put into you is built upon this very frenetic sense of montage and so on and so forth, that an energy is created through all of this movement between shots and so forth, whereas his films deal with this just like I said, you get a sense of real presence, and I think for a film student that could possibly be inspiring. The deal with the environment the environment they have around them and the possibilities within that environment. There's just that strong sense of it.
I think that's good. I mean, that's a good point, and probably what does happen with his films is it's mostly critically acclaimed or liked by people who study. It's like filmmaking for filmmakers, and he's a kind of a self-made. I mean, I don't really completely understand the relationship between him and his brother. I think his brother was the one who kind of broke into the business and is more commercial and played along with the system, and then he joined in without any schooling, without any financial backing, and kind of started writing and producing and directing all his own work, and he's always done that since then. So he's also this symbol of how you can, you can be an auteur filmmaker. You don't have to be just a cog in the system and so on.
Very Rodriguez-esque.
Or I actually,
which is also kind of mythological. You have to add. I mean, there's nothing, you really can't make that kind of cinema on your own. That's something that students should understand as well.
Still amazing, though.
But your comments, Mark, and your comments have also made me think of the other film I think of when I watch this, which is Christmas, American Job.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is also a film, very skillfully made with an economy of means, about an economy of means. And I just wanted to mention also one of the most startling shot in this film is the most atypical, and it always, the few times I've seen this film, just blows me away, just because I think it's beautiful and also because there's nothing else like it in the film. But when that garbage man dies and there's that shot of that black dog racing through the junkyard.
That's my favorite shot in the three films.
I mean, there's the only transcendence I guess I see is like his spirit, being able to charge away. And I do remember from Kaurismäki's film La Vida Bohème. There's another great dog scene in that film.
His use of dog is very good.
It's important to me, but anyway. But that shot, I just wanted to mention that shot because I found it so startling.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and it's not directly related to what you're saying. Actually, I think we can go 3 more minutes because I don't see the next people coming, and we kind of got a late start.
Sorry.
And I do want to talk about one more little thing. But one thing about directing that Aki Kaurismäki said when I was perusing through interviews and stuff was that he, someone asked him, well, don't you ever want to show more emotion in your films? And he said, I always want to show emotion, but I want to show it through a minimum of action. He wants to show a lot of emotion just by someone touching a table or something, and that will elicit all the emotion. So he likes to have a lot of emotion under minimal acting. And he talked a lot about how he hates having actors be like windmills, just flailing around and showing all their emotions. He's completely opposed to that. But I wanted to, one last little thing I wanted to ask you guys about is Kati Uttinen, or Katie Uttinen. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Uttinen.
Yeah. I just am interested in how you think she was portrayed in his films, and how I personally was really impressed by her versatility in a sense, or his versatility with her, that he, on the one hand, was able to make her seem like this very...
They're showing up.
Oh, they are showing up. Okay. Are they really?
I think so.
No, I don't think so. Maybe not. This very well. It seemed like she was able to play these many different kinds of roles and different kinds of women, like a sort of a woman who no one wants to date, and then a woman who was very attractive. I thought in Shadows in Paradise. Mark?
Well, that's one of the things, though, in using her to get back to something else about the line being crossed of unbelievability when she's sitting there at the bar among the four women, and they
Everyone picks everyone
exactly,
else but her.
and she's left, and then as time passes, there's the buildup of the beer bottles. Well, she being left there momentarily, perhaps, right? But when you see the time with all of those beer bottles, that as time passes, it actually becomes an impossibility. I mean, no one. That's not going to happen. She's not there. Why? Decent looking like that, why is she going to be left to sit there alone? And that's where it just breaks the spell. You just can't. For, like I said, perhaps maybe the last one behind for some reason, but not after that passage of time. No dice. So
he was stretching.
Yeah, we
believability
understand
for
the
drama.
point that she's lonely, her alienation. We understand. Okay, we get that. So that's presented. But then we have to move on from that.
Interesting take, Mark.
Instead of sink into a premise that is becoming more and more unbelievable.
We should wrap
We
it
should
up.
probably wrap it up.
But,
The Onion Breath Radio Theater.
yeah, it
is
does seem
starting
like
to
they
come in
are
here.
actually here.
So let's.
So sorry. Well, I guess we,
Start mumbling
So that's
Oh,
been
my.
this week's show with My Dinner with Gabe,
Sweet.
Zav LaPlay, and
Sorry,
Gabe Van
yeah.
Handel. We had Mark Borchardt and Carl Bogner on talking about the Proletariat trilogy. And once again, the films in that series are Shadows in Paradise, Ariel, and Match Factory Girl. And also, for further viewing, you can watch Leningrad Cowboys, Go America. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
thanks for coming, you guys.
Thanks for having
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
This was great. This was just a blast.